Peace, 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 peace. Yo, off the rip, just take a moment and think about what you're grateful for right now. Just take a moment. And to amplify that gratitude, when I say, ooh, ooh, you already know what it is. I love it. We are so freaking excited to welcome you into this beautiful, beautiful frequency that we call the Glorya Kaufman School of Dance. We hope you continue to dive into this experience, this celebration, this obnoxious gratitude cipher for hip-hop's 50th. Yes? And in the spirit of that gratitude, we want to thank Visions and Voices for giving us mad love on the dinero side, on that plata side. Yeah. All my colleagues here at the Glorya Kaufman School of Dance have made this happen. I know it seems like I did it by myself because it's so fly, but there's some fly people in this building, trust. I am like beyond, like, sheesh, I can't even put words to it, to bring this most amazing person to the stage right now. I'm gonna read this, and then y'all gonna get read, and I'm so excited. DJ Lynnée Denise, a global practitioner of sound, language, and Black Atlantic thought. Lynnée Denise is an Amsterdam-based writer and interdisciplinary artist from Los Angeles, California. Give it up for the West Side. Shaped by her parents' record collection and the 1980s, Denise's work traces and foregrounds the intimacies of underground nightclub movements, music migration, and bass culture in the African diaspora. She coined the term DJ scholarship in 2013, 10 years ago, fam, do the math, which explores how knowledge is gathered, interpreted, and produced through a conceptual and theoretical framework, shifting the role of the DJ from a party purveyor to an archivist and cultural worker. A doctoral student in the Department of Visual Culture at the Goldsmiths University of London, Denise's research contends with how iterations of sound system culture construct a living archive and refuge for a Black queer diaspora. Let me tell you, she comes in many tongue, unspun between the sun and Shambhala. Starseed, earth deed to make y'all holler. Yes, 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 y'all. 33.3 secs, the black disc revolves. Final call for alcohol, the only call some of y'all seem to respond to. Let me stop playing. Final call for alcohol, the only call y'all seem to respond to. Oh, someone tried to do my little call. 33.3 secs in the zone, the tone. We all know the revolution is vinyl. Final solution is the intrusion of the drum, and the DJ is the only revolutionary dance in trance on cue. The DJ booths the pulpit. We be in the sacred ground movement, benchless pews. I'm waiting to see when DJ Lynnée Denise comes up in here, who gon' catch the Holy Ghost up in here. Hallelujah. And without any further ado, we bring up my sister DJ Lynnée Denise. Ooh,
every day you get introduced with all that soul. With all that soul. Damn. Black church. Immediately thought of Aretha Franklin in 1972 when she said, I want to come to Watts and record this album. You're my James Cleveland. Hey y'all, what's up? Hello, hello, hello. I flew here from Amsterdam, and boy, are my arms tired. I flew here from Amsterdam a couple of days ago. It takes me a moment to adjust, 9 hours, right? I'm born and raised here. So the return home is an interesting kind of journey because I have to adjust, right? So it's amazing to adjust on Jefferson and on this campus and with a room full of dancers and artists and thinkers. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Give it up, too, for the music you heard when you walked through the door. It's not every day. It's not every day that you get to hear Prince, right, on campus, or Classic House, right? I saw you guys bust in a cipher, and you were called to the circle, right? Hello? Yeah. Y'all with me? Okay, so, no, but thank you so much for coming out. Where do we all begin? Hip-hop is 50, and I'm 48. So that alone is an interesting thing. I was born in 1975 in the Valley, interestingly enough. Went to Audubon, went to Dorsey, taught at Cal State LA, taught at UCLA, right? Did my first knee spin in Pacoima. Those kinds of things. Learned my first rap song, right here, 5 Minutes of Funk, Houdini, right? I'm from LA. And I rep LA and Amsterdam. They be looking at me like, this is Crenshaw, what's up? How y'all feeling? I like your clogs. This is Crenshaw, right? I'm from Crenshaw, right? Leimert Park, right? So yes, y'all, Sabela, why you do that? I'm literally, where do I begin? Yeah, so hip hop is 50, I'm 48, I was born in 1975, I am a Capricorn. So I'm here with the details for sure. And I'm gonna kind of flow tonight. I'm not even necessarily set on a format. Will y'all flow with me, please? Yeah. Y'all don't mind where I go? Need a journey. It is going to be a journey and a sort of interesting time machine. Let me see if I can adjust. Because I have a lot of young people in the room and we're talking about a 50-year history, right? So I have to kind of figure out a way to keep y'all engaged and kind of be present with, where we all are and the different places that we're coming from. So being raised in the 1980s means that I witnessed Ronald Reagan politics, right? Reaganomics. It means that I witnessed the influx of crack in Black and brown communities here. But I also witnessed Maxine Waters' response to the CIA and her holding them accountable, right? It means that I witnessed this, as Prince would say, big disease with a little name, AIDS, right? In the 1980s is when I began to witness a kind of disappearing dance floor, right? So my work is about the ghost who I walk with, those who disappeared, those who were disappeared, because alongside that Reaganomic trap of white supremacist foolishness was the mass construction of prisons, mass incarceration, and in the 1980s, a massive boom in incarceration and therefore the intentional sort of, destruction of Black and brown families. It is deep to me that within that moment emerges some of the most important electronic music in the world, and it does not stop or begin with hip hop. Because if we're talking about the 1980s, and even if we're talking about 50 years, well then we are talking about electro-funk, we're talking about techno, we're talking about house, we're talking about post-boogie, post-disco, and hip hop. Quite honestly, hip hop is a little younger than some of those folks who, and some of those genres of music that were brewing prior to, the Sedgwick moment. Anyone familiar with the Sedgwick moment? Cool. So here's the thing. If we're talking about hip hop being 50 years old, then we're talking about it having its start in 1973, right? 2 years before I was born. But in 1975, we are talking about the sort of influx of band-based music like the Ohio Players, Funkadelic, Parliament, right? But we are also talking about a kind of golden era of hip hop. How many of you are familiar with the term golden era of hip hop? Can anyone name an artist from the golden era? Kool Moe Dee, absolutely. Anyone else? Anything else? From the golden era of hip hop, y'all? Okay, I'll give you years. Eric B. and Rakim, absolutely. So we're gonna bring hip hop. Oh, by the way, this is about to be interactive. So I'm gonna be asking. I'm not about to sit up here and do all the talking now, like, right? Kool Moe Dee, Eric B. and Rakim, Sugar Hill Gang, absolutely. Golden era, folks between, let's just say, 1979 and 1989. LL Cool J, Big Daddy Kane, Run DMC, Roxanne Shante.
Well, my name is Roxanne. Don't you know? I just a cool rock a party and I do this show. I said I met these three guys and you know it's true. So let me tell you and explain them all to you. I met this dude with the name of a hat. I didn't even walk away. I didn't give him no rap. But then he got real mad and he got a little tired. If he worked for me, you know he would be fine.
So, Roxanne Shante, right? 1984, 14 years old, hooked up with Marley Marl, was like, hey, you want me to rhyme on your beat? Well, I'm doing laundry. I can rhyme in between doing this laundry for my family. I have a freestyle in tow. And rhymed over the Marley Marl beat and created Roxanne's Revenge in response to UTFO, who had a song called Roxanne, Roxanne. But I want you all to notice that many of the names we call from the golden era were cis men, right? And so finally we brought Roxanne into the room. I'd like to bring MC Lyte.
You love me, it doesn't matter, it goes into my head as just chit chatter. You may think it's egotistical or just very free, but what you say I take none of it seriously. And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you so. I'd let you pretend to read me, and then you know, cause I hate when one attempts to analyze. In fact, I despise those who even try to look into my eyes to see what I am thinking. That dream is over, your yacht is sinking. I tell all of you, like I told all of them, what you say to me is just paper thin. Word.
Right? Just bringing women into the room. Can we do that when talking about this hip-hop 50 situation? I mean, it'd be weird. It's kind of weird that we've been sort of conditioned to think about music as being created by a single gender. It's kind of weird, right? But that has been the dominant narrative, and so I'm here to interrupt that because the other side of that narrative is that that music was created by, you know, heterosexual folks. So part of my work is about queering these stories and thinking about not just queering these stories, but locating the queer roots and queer influences of these different genres of music. Y'all with me? Yeah. So I coined the phrase DJ scholarship in 2013. Quite honestly, I was sort of bored to death with the culture. For me, I wanted to kind of expand the way that I was engaging the decks. And for me, that meant including literature, thinking with folks, learning about the history of different forms of music, and being critical of the music, right? And sort of developing a real important eye to not only listen and hear and see the music, but begin to read and write and perhaps reshape the stories around the music. Y'all with me? So one of the things that was interesting to me was that I fell in love, deeply in love with house music. I fell deeply in love with house music, and then I felt betrayed, like, wait, we weren't hearing that in LA, right? Especially on K-Day, right? I mean, so I grew up listening to Dr. Dre and, and Mike T and Bobby Jimmy. See, now we're getting into a whole nother generation. Bobby Jimmy, is anyone familiar with Bobby Jimmy, right? 1580 K-Day, one of LA's first hip hop stations. That's fine. I grew up. This is where I became a child of the golden era. Not just Queen Latifah and MC Lyte, but also Salt and Pepper, right? MC Trouble, KRS One, Public Enemy, all of those people we were listening to. But I learned about house music once I left LA. Because I want to be honest, part of why I wasn't fully moved by what I thought was house is because I associated it with a kind of gay male sound, right? A gay white male sound, I meant to say, like a gay white male sound. That's maybe my limited access to it. And so when I became hip to the history of Chicago house, of New York house, and even Detroit house, not just techno, something changed in me. right? I got washed over. It's a kind of baptism when one becomes a house head. And so when you hear these things like house music all night long, it means something. It means something that my homegirl said, would you come with me to the shelter? I was like, absolutely. What time do you want me to be there? She said 3 a.m. I said, no. What do you mean? She said, no, we're going to go at 3 a.m. Oh, let me take this disco nap and see what y'all talking about. Like, let me see what y'all talking about. And sure enough, you know, that clock struck 3. She picked me up. We went downtown off of Lincoln, near Jersey, Lincoln Tunnel. And I walk in, and it is the bass, the bodies, the sweat, the movement, the witnesses, the church, the conductor, the minister, the congregation, the reading of certain Bible texts called beats. And I'm like, what? The dance floor, the ring shout, the circles, the capoeira, basically, right? The diasporic memory, right, that is coming through this dance floor. And I'm sitting here like, should I dance? Should I watch? Should I draw? Should I eat? What should I do? What is my role? I do have a role. Damn, I have a role. I have a responsibility in this club to contribute, not just here to receive, but to contribute. And I stayed, and I stayed, and I stayed, and we walked out, and it was 12 noon. It was 12 noon. So when Octavia was writing about, you know, those vampires in Fledgling, is that what it's called, you all? She writes about vampires and how these black vampires were able to survive in the sun. That's what came up for me, like what black folks do at night and what happens when we then return to the sun. We don't lose our power, especially if you've been restored by house. You walking out with power, right? That's not even what I came to talk about, y'all. I truly don't even know. That just came from what Sabela did. So DJ culture, music migration, and black music geographies, we're gonna do something like that. We are going to go into that space, and I just wanted to start with making it clear that hip hop's 50th year is house music's 50th year, right? Like that there are multiple forms of genres of music, and we're not gonna do that thing of focusing on one and then within that focusing on cis men who are, you know, straight or who identify as straight publicly. So what is the, hold on. I wasn't going there, but that's deep that's where it went. I mean, hey, people got stories. So, because people are human and therefore, right? So what the hell is DJ scholarship? You know, what is DJ scholarship? And so I want to introduce the 4 cultural practices that define it. And for students, let me do this because there are students in the room. Part of what happened and how this kind of framework emerged is because I was writing a grant. Right? I was like, damn, is there something that I can do or something that I can present or something that I could propose that would have someone invest in my work? That would have a foundation pay me to develop my work. But damn, what is that work? Okay, DJ scholarship. Okay, that's a start. DJ scholarship. What is the breakdown? Is it a method? Is it a framework? Is it a concept? Right? And it's a combination of all of those things, right? So the 4 cultural practices. 1, chasing samples. Because that's where it started for me. And when Sabela read my intro and said I was raised by my parents' record collection, I mean it. And also, my oldest sister just walked in the room. I was raised by her taste in music as well. So that means I was raised on the SOS band, Lakeside, Parliament, Funkadelic. And in terms of her music, I was raised on like, you know, Tina Turner, right? Some of the new wave stuff in the 80s, hip hop, EPMD in particular. Right, Tina Marie, Rick James, right? I'm just giving you a view of like what I was hearing and what shaped my ear. And so chasing those samples were interesting because I'd be listening to Public Enemy. I was like, that's a trip because my dad said that he heard this before. I didn't know he was listening to Public Enemy. No, he's like, no, that's James Brown. I'm like, you playing. That is not James Brown. It is James Brown. It was James Brown, right? And so then I'm learning, like, just through chasing those samples that hip hop is a kind of repository, meaning that it's a place where folks are sort of storing information, archives, sounds, songs, people, and ideas. Like that it's an archive, sampling and holding those stories musically within this genre of music ends up making that genre of music a sort of cultural institution of memory. Y'all hear me? So it was through hip hop that I was not only chasing these samples, but like I said, chasing ideas, because sometimes they would sample folks like Farrakhan, right? And I'm like, well, who's Farrakhan? Or sometimes they would sample commercials from like, you know, McDonald's commercials to critique beef. Next thing you know, I'm a vegetarian for 17 years. I'm like, what? Beef, what a relief. When will this poisonous product cease? Right? That's what BDP and KRS once said. So had me thinking critically. Hey, pay attention to what Reagan is doing. Pay attention to what Bush is doing. And those ideas, different news, you know, clips from news stories and stuff were being sampled. And so hip hop is a place where I was developing a critical consciousness and then following those samples, these little fragmented, you know, pieces of history, and then landing in different places. And that developed my intellectual curiosity. I became curious because I was chasing those samples. I want to show you something, because what's interesting about how we were calling a lot of cis men and thinking about hip hop is that the discussion about hip hop samples also tend to focus on folks like James Brown, Isaac Hayes, Marvin Gaye, Parliament Funkadelic, right? And I wrote a piece about the afterlife of Aretha Franklin's Rocksteady, because it's a song that had been sampled over 100 times and no one speaks about it, right? Because so much of that narrative is about how men were sampling men. So let's listen to Rocksteady, right? Y'all ready? So, Aretha Franklin, Rocksteady. Raise your hand if you've heard that song before. Huh, okay. So, in 1988, I was driving down the street with my sister in her white Nissan Sentra on a Sunday. Did y'all hear me? We were driving down the street in a white Nissan Sentra on a Sunday. What street were we on a Sunday? We were on Crenshaw, okay, on a Sunday. My sister's playing a group called EPMD. So the first time I heard Aretha Franklin's Rocksteady was actually EPMD's I'm Housing.
There's a world of me. 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 Cool on the scene like a horse in a stable. A brother got ill and tried to snap the fat cable. I stepped back like it wasn't a thing. Punched him in the jaw with the FACO ring.
So I'm at Fisk University, which is a black college in Nashville, Tennessee, and I heard the Aretha Franklin song, the original. I was like, what do you mean that was Aretha Franklin? We have not discussed Aretha Franklin as a treasure chest for important samples, right? So that chasing of the samples is also a kind of way to combat the erasure of black women in the creation of music, of black music, of funk music, of soul music, of gospel music. It's a way to resuscitate, right, their names, their legacies, their bodies of work, in fact. because discovering that sample then sent me on a whole trip to the Aretha Franklin, School of Musical Thought. I went to the Aretha Franklin Detroit-based university, and by that I mean I was digging through the crates, second cultural practice, of her life. I was digging through the crates of her life when I discovered that a PMD sampled her in 1988. And in that crate digging, I discovered her relationship, say, with folks like Martin Luther King, right? And that her father, C.L. Franklin, was a minister in Detroit with his own church, and that church was responsible for helping Martin Luther King to fundraise for the March on Washington. This is through a sample. Through the sample, I discovered Aretha Franklin's relationship with the blues, right? And the fact that her father was, unlike other ministers, not protective, not judgmental about the fact that she was, quote unquote, leaving gospel, leaving the church to go and sing the devil's music. In fact, he was her manager, right? And part of that management was who he was as a father, which meant that at the age of like 5 and 6 years old, when Aretha Franklin began to play the piano, she was introduced and in fact babysat by folks like Mahalia Jackson, Dinah Washington, right? And if you all don't know those names, look them up. You have to look up Mahalia Jackson, Dinah Washington, and learn about these jazz vocalists, these black women that have contributed to black music in all its forms for the last 50 years or more. In this context now, we're talking about 60, 70, right? So that's from chasing the samples and digging through the crates. And really what I learned through these cultural practices is that being a DJ taught me how to develop a serious research practice, an investigative practice. And I was thinking about footnotes, right? All of a sudden, I was thinking about what it meant to trace these stories and then to create a visual and or a sonic map through the mixtape, right? So chasing samples, digging through the crates, developing a research practice, having an intellectual, a serious intellectual thirst and curiosity that took me to different places in the world just by chasing those samples. Album cover art analysis. How many of you, if you were to just kind of think about an album that moves you, does the cover come to mind? I'm curious, because I think different generations would answer that question differently, right? Because say, for example, and I know I keep using them as an example, but they are an important example in the development of a sort of black musical visual culture, and that is Parliament. I mean, they hired an artist named Pedro Bell to construct a visual cosmology of their sound. Their sound was based on a sort of future-oriented afterlife for black people, and it had an actual visual to it, those album covers. Or maybe Ohio Players. I was too young to have some of those covers be given to me, right? Because there were like black women, they were bald, they were gorgeous and dark-skinned with chains and honey leaning on, and I was like, there is a sensual thing that my mama doesn't want me to see, but I really want to see it. There's the Prince album cover, he's out here with just bikinis on, right? Like that I'm sitting up here having my sexuality shaped by black music album covers. Or something simple and elegant like a Sade cover. Just her face, and just how that face ended up representing this important, gorgeous sound. So I ended up digging through the crates of Sade's life, ended up in London, ended up in Nigeria. Right? Just by chasing that sample, just by being curious about the cover, just by being like, she's a tortured soul, I love her. Oh, she's a Capricorn. Right? So album cover art analysis, right? And that those album covers, so pay more attention, young people, to these album covers. Maybe how they've changed over the years. Maybe if you are interested in hip hop's 50th anniversary, go and look at some of those album covers from the 80s and maybe compare them to some of the album covers now, right? So that you have a visual reference, right? And also because there is an archive available that you can have access to. So, Album cover art is an important way for us to think about what music looks like and how folks are sort of conceptualizing their sound through these images. The last and final cultural practice is liner note studies. Raise your hand if you're familiar with liner notes. This is what see when I teach, this is what I see y'all doing. That is not a full, it's one of these, like I think. It's okay if you don't know. I want to know if you don't know. Okay, raise your hand if you're not familiar with liner notes. That's helpful. See? Wow, generational differences. Well, okay. That's okay. That's perfect. I'm glad you didn't know until now, because you're going to go back and be like, DJ Lynnée Denise was talking about liner notes, and now, okay. Liner notes, studies. Because I hated reading when I was younger. And I would hate when my dad would come in the room, like, turn off those videos and read something. I'm like, you read something. Like, I don't want to read. What you read? What you see who's on? Yo MTV Raps is on. Like, I am reading. I'm learning the lyrics, right? Like, read something. Those will be those moments where I'll be like, okay, well then let me go and read the package that came with a Tribe Called Quest album. The full package. Let me take in this context, the CD out and flip through it. Not just look at the names of the songs, but who did they sample? Who is, the engineer? Who was on this verse? Who wrote this song? Right? Liner notes provides those important details, sometimes the social context of the album, right? Like that it's a source of information about the album. And see, here's the thing, I wasn't clear when I said I became bored in 2013 and thought about other ways to engage the culture. Part of that was about what I felt like was an addiction to the familiar, right? Like addiction to the single. Right, so when iTunes made it possible to buy one song at a time, that changed many of our relationships with full albums. I grew up in a generation where we had relationships with the full album. It was a multi-sensorial situation. We were like, ooh, what is that? People were writing their names on these albums, right? These albums meant something. People were flipping those albums over. Right, people were cleaning those albums with alcohol. We shouldn't have been doing that. I wouldn't do that now. Don't do that now, y'all. But it did work, like putting pennies on the actual, on the needle so that it wouldn't hop. Like we had an intimate physical relationship with albums. So what does it mean to go from that to being able to choose one album, or one song rather, for 99 cents? It just changes, I even think, the way that we receive, consume, engage music, so I was just like, well, how can I maintain my relationship to the entire album experience? And that was it. So those are the 4 cultural practices of DJ scholarship. Are y'all still with me? Yes. And these are my hands right here on the decks, right? Okay, so I don't know how much time I have, but I can see I'm not gonna be able to move through everything, but I wanted to talk about some key terms, texts, and thought partners, right, that I roll with, and just let you all see this practice and what I mean by scholarship, right, that it is about a true critical engagement of the music beyond listening, right, and extends to the page, extends to film. So one of the most important books that I've come across in my life is a book written by the late geographer Clyde Woods, and it's called Development Arrested, right? And it's about a kind of interesting geopolitical history of the Mississippi Delta, which then gave birth to blues culture. And he's looking at blues culture as a kind of form of social explanation. And he is arguing that, yes, a lot of the blues musicians in the early or the late 18th century were obviously functionally illiterate. They were witnesses to slavery, or their parents were enslaved, right? So they're coming out and creating this music with limited resources, right? Including coming from a generation of people who were killed for trying to read and write, and yet using the music as a form of social critique, right? And so that's what that book is about. It's about a kind of epistemology, is what he calls it, a blues epistemology, epistemology indicating the ways in which knowledge is produced. And so he's looking at working class production, cultural production, and valuing it. And I'm like, that's what hip hop is. It's about what working class black and brown folks created, right? Supposedly in the Bronx, if we leave it to that single narrative story, right? That they created this sound with limited resources. Right now it's a multi-billion-dollar business. I'm not saying that as an accomplishment, by the way. That's not the accomplishment for me, right? Like, but it is important to think about that there is a traceable history of black music containing social critique, right? Or, you know, just like an important way for us to think through sound or think with sound. The other book is What the Music Said, and it's important to me. It's written by Dr. Mark Anthony Neal, and it was the first time that I heard someone talk about a Black American diaspora, and thinking about the Black South as a kind of Black American motherland, right? And what it means to think beyond the idea of black folks simply moving and migrating from the north to the south, or from the south to the north, but also thinking about, again, the sounds, the people, the songs, the clothes they came with, and how when they landed in those places, they helped to create new genres of music. That's massive to think about. So an example of that may be something like a Muddy Waters, who's a blues musician who was from Mississippi. He travels to Chicago and makes his life there. And one thing that he discovers is that his acoustic blues guitar doesn't have the capacity to reach everyone in the venue in these new sort of Midwest industrial cities, right? These larger spaces. Now he needs the music and his guitar in particular to be amplified. So he's one of the first to use an electric guitar and creating the urban Chicago electric blues that would not have been created had he not migrated from the Mississippi Delta to Chicago and to adjust this new form of music, right, to the conditions that he found himself in. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's major. Yeah. To be traveling and then landing and then creating a genre because you got there, because you traveled with your own ideas, your own sounds, right, and you expanded them based on the social conditions and what they called for. So the other thing, which is a really important text for us to think about in this trajectory of hip-hop's 50th year, is a book called Black Noise, written by Trisha Rose. Yep. It's a holy text for those of us who are interested in hip-hop dance studies or hip-hop scholarship in general. And it's a book that I read that I was like, wait a minute. First of all, she's a black woman. She's doing this. She's still doing her work. She's at Brown University, where I also plan to be in a couple of weeks. She is a massive thinker and an important voice in the development of hip-hop studies in the academy, right? So hopefully you all take a picture of these screens and dig through the crates for these books. The other is, there is A Disco Ball Between Us, which is a recent book by Jafari S. Allen, that has me really engaged in the idea of black gay habits of mind. Black gay habits of mind. He uses the anthology to talk about how black folks had to kind of track and trace who was still alive in the 80s and capture their voices through their own words on the page. So one book that he references in the book that sort of is centered in his text is an anthology series called In the Life, right? And that was edited by Joseph Beam. And Joseph Beam dies from AIDS before the book is complete. So too that many of the men who contributed to the text, right? So out of these black gay habits of mind and the use of anthology, we have important documents like the documentary Paris is Burning, which is another example of black gay habits of mind, and dance. And dance. The importance of dance. And the fact that through that film, though it has many questions around it, there are many critiques about Jenny Livingston, the woman who, recorded the film, and the question of exploitation. We have a document of this particular black gay habit of mind, which includes the birth of voguing, and that did not start with Miss Madonna. It wasn't Miss Madonna. We have a document. We have a document that says that it was like Dominican, Puerto Rican, Caribbean, Black American gay youth who had to find chosen family, who gathered in the ballrooms, right? And who projected and built their lives around a sense of realness, and what those categories were beyond pose, right? And pose being an important kind of tribute and way to an honorific way, right? To think about that culture, that time in the New York 1980s. So Black Gay Habits of Mind. And then finally, Black Diamond Queens, written by Marine Man. It's a book about Black women at the roots of rock and roll, right? I think that, how many of you are familiar with this latest conversation about, I'm not even gonna say his name, but the editor of Rolling Stone magazine and the comments he made about not wanting to include Black women and Black artists in his book on the masters and blah, 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 right? So, precisely, thank you for that sound, that sound of disapproval, right? So, Marine Man comes and does something amazing. She traces, say, for example, characters like Tina Turner, and makes it clear that folks like Mick Jagger, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, that they were listening to these women closely, but not just listening, looking at how they moved, taking those moves on stage, right? And becoming part of a sort of white boy gatekeeping club that earned millions of dollars and still earning millions of dollars because they had radio stations, publications, and performances on lockdown using Black forms of art, typically, created by Black women and Black people, right? So we know that at the roots of rock and roll is blues music. And so Marine Man does something spectacular in tracing the roots of rock and roll to Black women, right? And so in that book, she includes Willie Mae Thornton. Willie Mae Thornton, anyone familiar with Willie Mae Thornton? Anyone familiar with Big Mama Thornton? Raise your hand. Ooh, this is important. Raise your hand if you're not familiar with her. Hi, raise your hand high, because there's an amazing gift for you, I hope. Raise your hand high if you are not familiar with Willie Mae, Big Mama Thornton. Raise your hand high. Perfect, because guess what? I wrote a book about her. And I'll tell this story quickly and just say that, I was approached by the University of Texas Press. They were like, hey, would you write a book as a part of our series called Why Music Matters? And we see the work you do around Prince. Would you write around Prince? I said, I cannot. I cannot write about Prince because it's gonna change my relationship with him. And I wanna maintain a personal relationship with him. Plus, I don't want a deadline around my relationship with Prince, right? That's not the plus. Plus, there is enough written about Prince. When I discovered who she was, beyond the site of injury that I'm referring to as this hound dog moment, right? That Willie Mae is the Black woman from Alabama who originally sang the song Hound Dog. You ain't nothing but a hound. We're familiar with that, right? But you're familiar with it probably through who? And he was a hero to most. But he never meant. But anyway, so, see, that's a reference, a generational reference, it's a sample. So, I don't know what I'm doing on time, but I'm actually running quite behind, so I don't know what we're doing, but it's 5:59. Just tell me how many minutes. We got about 10 extra minutes. 10 extra? Okay, well then quick, let me do my... Okay, cool. So I wrote that book on her. It's available now. You can find it. But the larger point is that, there was one book written on her. There was very little information about her. I had to chase the samples of her life. Her life was scattered across the liner notes of other musicians, mainly males, right? Or mainly men. So I had to figure out a way to write the book. I wrote the book. Here it is. Pick it up when you get a chance. Black music geographies. Here's a trick that we can do to think about what that means. Chicago house, Detroit techno, LA electro-funk, right? Chicago blues, Mississippi Delta, right? Like that, there is a thing happening where Black folks land, they create genres of music. And that those genres of music are traceable based on place. Black music geographies, Prince, Minneapolis, right? and that Minneapolis crew is connected to Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, who then produced Janet Jackson, who in the midst of a Prince and Michael Jackson rivalry did one of the most gangster things, and very few people pick up on it. That rivalry, which interestingly enough ends up being a rivalry between Indiana, Gary, where they're from, and Minneapolis. In the song Escapade, Janet Jackson says what, Sabela? Minneapolis. She's not from Minneapolis. She said Minneapolis. She said, brother, I love you, Michael, but I am with this particular musical, geographical, funk bot crew named Prince and the Revolution, Prince and the New Power Generation, Prince, right? That she identified herself by a place that she didn't even belong to. So musical cross-pollination, I'm thinking about the 1980s. In fact, let's see what that looks like. Black electronic music, I think we know we're talking about the 1980s during that Reagan moment, that black folks started playing with machines, drum machines, synthesizers, keyboard, right? Electronic keyboards, and creating music in their basements, right? And that those genres of music, again, whether we're talking about techno, house, or hip hop, are now multi-billion-dollar forms of music with huge sort of like an ecosystem of hardcore economic, serious capital and wealth around these festivals that oftentimes don't make their way back to places like Detroit or the South Side of Chicago. So black music is quite political when you think about those geographies, but then also the musical cross-pollination and how different sounds and songs were mixing to create new genres using these machines. Race and technology and music. Race and place and music. This is where we're at. 1979, I'm just gonna say this. I'm gonna speed through this. It was such an important year. First of all, because of the song Good Times. Are we familiar with Good Times? Familiar? Aretha said, I'm not done. This is a major song for so many reasons. I really need 2 hours for this. Forget it, we're just gonna stay here for 2 hours. We'll just do this 2 hours. I need 2 hours for this. I'm not gonna take 2 hours, but the song is super important because supposedly, right, this is one of the first samples that we hear for the song. So, not that song, but this one. Sugar Hill Gang, 1979. They sample Chic, Good Times, and hip hop takes a turn. Right? So it's funny because Nile Rodgers, who wrote the song, said that he heard it by accident, like, wait, who is playing my song? Who they didn't ask permission, and this is one of the first cases, right, against sampling, and he ends up winning in court and getting co-writer production, which meant he got money for the, right? But that's not where, it's not just that moment. When we talk about, musical cross-pollination, I wanna show you 2 other songs quickly that song inspired, which created a whole nother kind of genre of music, which is sort of like a post-punk new wave. Here's one of the songs. right? Nasty, boom, boom, comes in. Blackness, sonic blackness comes in, is what the hell comes in, right? It doesn't stop there. There's another song that is also inspired by that 1979 moment, and is interestingly enough considered to be one of the songs that features a rap artist, or a rap, not a rap artist. Anyone know? Rapture. It is Rapture. 2 times, who said that? Who's Star? Golden Stars. Similar vibe, right? You can hear it, you can mix it with another right? So, right? So that musical cross-pollination, now I can't even show, I'll just show a quick moment, because when I talk about Downtown 81, which is the name of a film that Basquiat was part of, and he was a part of this kind of downtown art scene, but he was also part of the Fab Five Freddy, Blondie, Rapture crew, the visual art crew that was moving between downtown and uptown, and Basquiat was a DJ and a jazz musician and a post-punk artist and a queer man and a Capricorn. And a Capricorn, right? Here's just a quick example of that cross-pollination.
Check it out. I got 81 crime for 81 Jews, 81 cool man to 81 food, 81 scholarship from 81 school, but I gave all 81 to 81 food, 81 big chains with 81 rings, took 81 crowns from 81 kings, did 87 shows in 81 nights, cleared 81 grand in 81 nights, 81 limousines, 81 garages, 81 bees and master charges, bought 81 girls down to the knees, sucker MCs, like 81 women right upon the wall. In 81 minutes, I'll be rocking the ball. 87 times, say 87 rhyme.
So all of that was happening downtown, right? The mixture of songs, the blending of songs, the blending of cultures, of disco queer culture, of punk culture, of reggae culture from the migration routes from Jamaica and other islands, right? That part of that Hip Hop 50 is about a Caribbean migration to NYC and to London that creates a kind of diasporic base culture, right? That they are absolutely not just part of, but at the center of that culture because of sound system culture, right? Maybe I can end here. Hyper-masculine funk, the thing that's happening around this whole situation is that hip-hop and disco is at an interesting crossroads and an intersection, because you have folks like James Brown and George Clinton and Isaac Hayes that are like, okay, there's a war on live music, right? But then you also have these white rockers who was like, disco is a war on white rocksters, right? And so there was literally an anti-disco or a disco-phobic campaign, right? You have like a lot of like hyper-masculine black funk artists that are losing their jobs and losing gigs because folks are hiring DJs instead of full bands, right? And so we begin to replace, right, bands as cheaper. The DJ emerges as a celebrity. You want to get a DJ by the name of someone like Larry Levan or Frankie Knuckles to mix your song, right? Because then that song will be played on a black queer dance floor, and once that happened, church happens. The congregation wants more. The congregation wants to hear the song on a Sunday, through a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, look at my bad. So, you know what I'm saying? So that's an interesting thing to think, right? We're thinking about punk, we're thinking about dancehall, we're thinking about techno, like all of these things are happening in the 80s while Reagan is over here, slashing social programs, jailing people for crack addiction, laughing at AIDS. And we're over here in the basement creating these new sounds that are now multi-billion-dollar industries that we don't necessarily see. No, we don't know necessarily, that we do not profit from, that we do not, right, benefit from. Y'all with me? So Hip Hop 50 comes with a lot beyond a microphone, a rapper, a break dancer, a graffiti artist. It comes with a lot more, a lot of social and cultural context that we need to be thinking about during this 50-year moment, and also holding hip hop accountable. I mean, obviously, right? And holding ourselves accountable for not thinking about and questioning the role that women and queer folks play in the development of these cultures. We don't even think about it. We know we don't. It's not our fault. We're conditioned to not. We're conditioned to not. Because if I ask you to consider and think about a blues musician and close your eyes, chances are you're gonna think of a black man with a guitar. If I tell you to close your eyes and think about a rock star, chances are you might close your eyes and think about a white man with a guitar. If I right, like that there are images that come along with these musical genres that end up placing ownership where it doesn't belong. Y'all with me? So perhaps, do we have 3 minutes left?
I have you too.
All right, so let's end in Detroit. With the scene, because the other thing that I didn't want to do, I'm going to take 3 minutes. Sorry. So listen. No, my bad. I'll take 2. I'll take 2.5. So the thing that I want to say is that queer space, between Detroit and New York, another reason why I hated techno is like I just can't hear the sound, the soul. Where's the soul? Where's the soul? Where are black folks? What is techno? That is not black music. What do you mean? And then I dug through the crates and discovered Detroit black roots and in the queer roots of Detroit techno.
Who's this?
Tamika.
Are you ready to party, Tamika?
Sure.
Who's this?
Diane.
Diane, you ready?
Yes, I am.
Who's this? Rain. Who's this?
Mecca.
You ready? Everybody's ready? Hey, listen, before you do that, we gotta change the sound, as usual. From Motown to King Town, so we can throw all the way down. You ready to change it? Hey, listen, guys, we gotta change it. So be it. What's the name of this town? What are you ready to throw down?
See, it was 2 minutes. So I'm not gonna.
I used to go back.
No, I guess I should. Nope. I'm gonna honor the time. I'm gonna honor.
You can finish the video if you want.
Oh, you don't say. That's great. That's great. Okay, cool. Because it's actually like only 2 more minutes. Just to set this up, this is Kevin Saunderson, who's considered to be one of the sort of, thought leaders around techno, part of the Belleville 3 that includes Derek Mays and Juan Atkins, and this is a kind of trilogy of these like sort of quote-unquote founding fathers of techno, but he talks about this.
In the summer times, and sometime over the holiday time, to New York. Visit, I had brothers there, relatives, my father was living there, and my cousin, he said, we're going to hang out. We're going to, it's called the Garage. I remember when we entered the room, it is mainly men dance to this loud sound. So of course I'm observing this whole vibe. I don't know who Larry the Man is. I'm just coming to check out the scene.
Larry became the DJ that became famous more than the club. And that started DJs becoming famous, started DJs making money, started DJs remixing and producing records because record company owners saw extra money being made because a DJ's name was on a record.
At the time, I didn't know what was going on, how you could make the records mix together. That was my first education on mixing and hearing dance music. And I fell in love with the passion I seen these people have for the music, and I started having the same passion.
All right, so that's actually from a film called God Gave Them Drum Machines by my friend Christian Hill. Yeah. It's a film on the black roots and the queer roots of techno music. But check this out, my name is DJ Lynnée Denise. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I'm a Capricorn. Thank y'all for coming through.
Yo, give it up, give it up. Wow. Yo, who in the back got 2 points? Who got 2 points? Who got 2 points?
I'm her sister though, so it don't count.
Okay, we got a book for 2 points. We're gonna transition to some grub, but once again, give it up for DJ Lynnée Denise. Wow. Damn. Hallelujah.